Oh,
Okay, that's good. Okay, so we ready?
yeah, thank
I can
you.
edit out the front part of this, I think. Wait, let me stop. Let me do that again because I forgot. No, I don't want to end meeting. I want to end recording. Jesus. Tell me I didn't screw it up. No, I don't want to end meeting. I don't want to leave meeting. Oh, recording. Pause, stop. Hello, hello, and welcome to Old Women Who Write. I'm Jean Palin. I'm here to entertain you every once in a great while with some author that has crossed my path or I crossed their path. And I want to introduce you to them, but only if I've read their book or books and think that they're really good. So today I have a really good writer for you to learn about. Her name is Joanne Reed, excuse me, Joanne Reed. However, her pen name, which I want to talk to you about, Joe, her pen name is Joanne Priestly. So if I call her Joanne Reed, that's not going to be how you find her books. So we'll talk about that later. Joanne, I can't remember. Let me ask you right off, how did we connect? I can't remember. Did you
I,
contact me? Did I contact you?
when you were doing a TikTok and you asked for people to send you the books,
Ah,
so and I sent mine, and that's how we connected from there.
right, right, right. I forgot how we initially met
Yeah.
up. Okay, so right, so Joe sent me her book, or a one of her books, let me say. She has a number of them. She sent me one of her books called The Art of a Butterfly. That's the correct, yeah, The
Yeah.
Art of a Butterfly. It's a lovely name.
Oh, thank you.
Um, and I read it, and I read a lot of so-so books. They're okay, they're fine, but I was really taken by this book. And what I want to say about it, Joe, is that how I would describe it. I'm going to ask you how you would describe it too, probably. But how I would describe it is it's a story of character. I wrote this down: character, choices, relationships, trauma, pain, redemption, and love. Um,
Yeah.
I saw
Thank
all of those qualities in the story of the art of a butterfly. So now I'm babbling on about your book. Back up. You tell people who you are and where you live, first of all.
Certainly, I will. I'm, as you say, I'm Joe Priestley. Priestley was my maiden name, so that's where it came from. But I'm from Yorkshire, which is in the north of England. We're known for like the Bronte country that I live very close to. So that's why I sort of find inspiration from Yorkshire people and the Yorkshire landscape.
Yes, yes. Okay. And tell them, if you would, give them how you would describe to someone like the watchers here, what is your book about?
Well, The Art of a Butterfly was actually born out of a conversation that I had with my late mum. I was a teenager at the time, and she'd babysat for a couple, which is probably in the 30s, 1930s at the time.
Mm.
And they were so desperately in love, and quite rightly. But the lady had suffered a trauma, and there's no spoilers here because it's all about after this
Mhm.
period of life. She'd suffered a trauma and she'd lost all her hair. Now her husband was a really charismatic debonair man who was absolutely besotted with her, which is only quite right. But then they sort of reached a point where she recovered, if that's the word, or she was not just about losing her hair, it was obviously the distress that she'd gone through. And she became stronger. And that's when everything sort of changed for the couple. And it's really, I kind of call it like a study of a marriage over, in this case, around about a decade, and how things change through time and circumstance, really.
Yes, yes. So the art of a butterfly occurs, what, about 100 years ago,
Yes, yeah,
right after World War I. Am I right?
yes,
That's where it's set. Um, did you have to do? I was so impressed with the details that you have in there of the setting. I was also so impressed with how the characters, their manner, their way of speaking to each other, which seemed not of today.
Yes,
And
that's right.
how did you know how, for instance, how formal people were with each other, particularly in certain classes? How
Yeah.
did you do a lot of research? How did you know about that period? Not just the physical characteristics, but the human interactions. How did you know?
I think some of it is that I've sort of known people that quite elderly and of that kind of era, but a lot of it is because I devour historical fiction.
Ah, that's the
And
answer.
it's kind of something that really inspires me because there's so much going on under the surface of the politeness that
Yes,
people sort of live their lives in a very polite way, but there was always so much going on under the surface. And
yes,
that's really what I wanted to sort of explore. And I do that through all my books, really. And some are less formal than others. But yeah, that's why. But I wish I'd have been born a long, long time ago.
that explains it because clearly you're very consistent with it throughout the book. You know, I never feel there's a moment where I think, oh, a contemporary person wrote this. You know, it could have been
Thank
written
you.
by, Jane Austen or, in terms of being true to your time. Um, I also want people to know that there's a lot of tension in the book. There's, excuse me,
Right.
I've explained to Joe already that I have lousy lungs, and you just have to put up with me. Um,
Absolutely fine.
there's a lot of understated drama, but drama nonetheless. Drama in the marriage. I think each of the characters is faced with or addresses some form of temptation or or past trauma or difficulty just in relations like mother-daughter relations. And I really love that none of your characters are bad at heart.
No,
You
thank you. I, I think, very few people are, is probably my conception and my thoughts. I think we all are a victim of circumstance a lot of the time. And they were going through their own trials and tribulations and reacting accordingly, I suppose. But there was always a deep love between the
know,
characters, regardless. But that doesn't mean to say that life is perfect just because you're madly in love, or that's
yeah,
the way I perceived it, really.
yeah. Do you think that people were actually more innocent at that time, or do you think just they had sort of shells on or sort of manners that could cover pain or anger or jealousy or hatred even, I suppose. I mean, what do you think?
I think that's very true. I think there's a mask that people wore in certain periods of history. There was a way you was expected, and we still are expected to behave in a certain way today. And but more so then, I think, and people didn't really want to rebel against those norms. So that means that there's so much emotion that's repressed,
Yes,
and very few people get to see the real you, I would have thought, in those days, and
yes,
perhaps today as well. So that's why I think it's like they're almost playing a part to the world. But then obviously the mask slips sometimes, in good and bad ways. I mean, people are human, and that means they can be joyful as well as, the opposite. So So that's why, yeah, I find it quite fascinating how people behaved years ago.
Right. Do you know, one of, I think the stories, the signs of good storytelling is you switch in your book, you switch from character to character, also through time, some time period. But you'll have, the character, and then another character walks up and takes over. And I think a sign of good writing is that when it switches from one character to another, I'm always thinking, oh, I wanted to know more about that. You know, it always takes me a minute, only about a minute to get into, oh, this is her story now. Do you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And
And I totally understand that. Yeah. And I think some of it, it kind of does give you a little bit of anticipation as to what's going to happen next, because you have that little gap in between when something's
yeah,
happening elsewhere. So you
yeah.
can layer up the tension a little bit more.
Mhm.
But that's probably like a way of writing that I quite like, and I don't always like to lay my cards out on the table early on. It's,
Mm,
gentle peeling back of the layers kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's so good because I felt as though I really got to know each of those characters
Oh, lovely.
very
That's
well.
so nice to hear. I mean, I've been writing 11 years, and only started published last year.
Oh,
And so, the stories have been evolving for a long, long time,
yes.
but I thought my first book, I thought of the ending 30 something years ago. And then when my mum was battling dementia, and I had like a big family and working and everything. I just needed something to sort of focus my mind on. And I
Yes.
can't remember that moment when I just sat at the laptop and started to write, but obviously I did.
Yes.
Um, and it just became this passion, like I hear about people who play golf, and are addicted or whatever, or read, and for
Right.
me, I've never found it entirely, but until I started to write. But
Wow.
my grandma told me so many stories that they've all become like, they're all stored in my mind, and I can slot them into various plots and just life, by the time that we get to beyond half a century, shall we say, or whatever, the lot's sort of stacked up, really, hasn't it? So
I always had two big jealousies in my life. One is of people who can write fiction, okay? Because for me, it's like writing, like doing art. Like I freeze entirely and say,
yeah.
I have no clue. You put a pad and paints in front of me, I will probably have an anxiety attack because I feel
Oh,
so incredibly inadequate. I don't know how to do anything. And I feel the same way about fiction writing, that I cannot imagine writing fiction. The other thing is that writing for me was never a passion. When I wrote Feisty, my first book,
yeah.
my only book so far, except one couple I wrote collaboratively 20 years ago with two friends.
Right. Yeah.
Um, it was pandemic and it was a struggle for me to write. But I was so bored with life that I
Yeah.
had to do something. But now I'm finding working on the second book that I'm loving it. And I don't know what made the difference, but I'm thinking all the time about what story I want to write about because it's still a memoir type book.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and I'm thinking about it and I'm happy when I'm writing. And, I don't know what makes the changes in our being.
I know exactly what you mean, and I think some of it is just the fact that you've got that experience under your belt, so
Yeah.
you're more relaxed into the process,
Hmm.
so to speak. And I feel that helps so much, that you can approach something when you're not anxious about it, or
Yes,
just the
yes,
fear of the unknown kind of thing, isn't it? A lot of the time, but
yes,
once you've got a little bit of experience, you
yes.
kind of fall into it more, don't you? I
I think
suppose.
that's right. A little more confidence that I can do it. Yeah, I
Yes,
can do
yes.
it. Um, the Now, you've said, or I've said, that you've written several books. How many books have you written?
Well, as of today, because one's just been published, it's 8 books, and I'm working on my ninth. So
Okay, and
it
back of what year did you start writing?
so I started writing 11 years ago. And it was a very sort of off-on process, obviously big families, as I say, about everything else that were happening. I couldn't do it, all the time.
Hmm.
Um, and then latterly, as my family's grown up and left home, and I am a grandma now 3 times over, so I'm busy, as
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
I find that there are periods where I can sort of focus more.
Hmm.
But I would say that I was lucky to get offered 3 publishing contracts about 5 years ago. I chose a Northern publisher. They were brand new. I was really excited because I'm a Northern person, and I were a new author. And
Yes.
unfortunately, the publisher that I chose folded. So then it
Oh,
was a case of, right, well, what to do next? And then I decided to self-publish. And it's not the fact that you learn so much about writing, because obviously you do, but you learn so much about yourself. I mean, just actually sat here talking to you, I don't think I could have done it not that long ago, you
yeah.
know. So,
You said you were real nervous about
oh,
doing
yeah,
it. You,
I'm so scared of babbling.
you're very good. You're very natural. So you
Oh,
have nothing
thank
to worry about.
you.
So where does well, back up. What did you do before you were writing? Were you doing at home, doing family? Were you working?
Yes, I mean, I always worked at least part-time with my family growing up, but I was like a business writer was part of my job. So I
Oh,
was writing in some way, but then there was all these fictional stories sort of like floating about. And
yes,
perhaps subconsciously I knew one day, but that it might happen, but I can't recall that. I just feel it all happens so steadily and
yes,
organically, I suppose is the word. It wasn't like a sit down conscious decision.
yes.
This is what I want to do, and I think that's been my path anyway.
Uh, where does uh, where does the art of a butterfly fit in to the
It's the
library?
sequence. She is, Constance's story is number 7. So then
So it's been around for a while.
she no she's the sort of the released in June was Constance, but the actual story at the Art of the Butterfly has been sort of percolating since the conversation with
Oh,
my
oh,
mum, so
got it, got it.
yeah,
No,
so
I meant
she was
publication date,
latterly
like of all the books you've written, where it's number 7.
number 7. Yeah, that's right. And there, as I said, they're all Yorkshire sort of women who, I suppose what I've realised without knowing is that they've all got a good heart, but they're
Yes,
obviously human beings as well. And so they will make mistakes and disappoint people. But then it's how they try to resolve, their problems and the life experiences. So I think I haven't realized it, but having thought about it for the interview, I think that's probably in a nutshell the women that I write about, even though they're all in massively different circumstances, a lot of the time.
yeah.
But yeah, it's just historical fiction is just, my house is full of old furniture, even when it wasn't popular. I wanted my grandma's old things, and
Right, right.
so it kind of, in a way, it makes sense that I would write in another era.
But there's a lot of, it seems to me, and maybe it's just what I read, or by chance, it seems like there's a lot of currently written fiction by women that are set in World War II, particularly, but also World War One, but mostly World War II. This seems to be a new wave. That are you seeing this, or am I imagining it?
Yeah, very much so. I've noticed that a lot. And I mean, I think I purposely have, not in all the books, but I have war as certainly the last one that's just been released. I have war as a predominant sort of character, but it's usually just after,
Yes.
before or after, rather than talking about the actual war itself, which I think other people can do beautifully. But I'm more about the sort of the day-to-day interactions with people, that are the nuances that I pick up on, and I always have somehow, and without realizing. And it's that, rather than that, the war itself, that I tend to not write about. But yeah, you're very right. There's a lot. It's a popular genre.
Yeah, yeah, particularly World War II. It does seem,
Yes.
particularly probably because they're female writers, about the roles that women played, whether at home or at war, i-
Yeah.
in the war.
Yeah.
And it,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's kind of fascinating to me, and I've learned a lot about history,
Yeah. Yeah,
about
you do. Yeah.
reading fiction. Um, the story, no, let me back. So you didn't go through a learning process of writing. There's sort of two schools of thought. Like, you study to be a writer. You
Yeah.
go, you take the courses and all the courses you take, or it's a natural skill that comes out. Where do you land in there, do you think?
I would say somewhere absolutely in the middle. It's when I first started, I can look back on my work and be like, oh dear, and I'm not saying that now I'm MA level or whatever, but I feel obviously practice is just something that evolves, and practice makes you better at anything that you do. But I didn't do it, obviously I did it through school, and I thoroughly enjoyed writing then, if I look back.
Hmm.
But I didn't take it any further than that.
Yes.
And I've just really, I suppose, learned on the job is probably what we would say, Uh,
Did you have an editor for any of your books? A content editor, not a
I have,
proofreader.
it's like an editor that I use, but I know it sounds daft, but they get to know your style, and they can almost hear you saying the words, so they don't want to take too much of what somebody described as the Yorkshireness away.
Hmm.
Because it's like where you live, you'd want to have all your colloquialisms and all your sort of things that are familiar to North Carolina,
Yeah.
so you want to keep the essence of where you live, and
Yes.
that means that people sort of speak a certain way, and
Yes.
such. But yeah, I do have somebody, go through an
I
edit,
see. Yeah.
uh, which obviously does really help massively, because you get lost in a story. You'll know this, Jean, won't you?
Yes.
You literally get lost, and you can look at the words and they just swim,
Right.
after so long.
Right.
It can be months, can't it, working on something or
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. I've had an editor for the first book who was an old friend, but who also had professionally worked as an editor. And she quickly recognized my bad writing habits. Okay.
We all have them.
Yes. Yes. And and would beat me up over, stop it, over the head. And I would get so depressed that I would be thinking, well, I'm just not a good writer. I'm just not a good writer. And one day she said, Jean, the good writers have editors.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
famous writers have editors, right?
You
And that
do. Yeah.
that started to make sense to me then. Oh, it's not that I'm so bad that I have to have an
No,
editor.
no. And also, it took just one person to believe in me when my
Yeah.
first book was published last year. And nothing happens. I mean, sometimes nothing happens at all now, but
Yes.
certainly in the beginning. And just one person wrote this review, and it was one line that I'll remember forever. And whenever I think, oh, am I any good, like we all do, I just think about that person who's I'm still in touch with now, and I think, oh, yeah, and it's motivation in it to keep going, and do your
Absolutely.
best.
Absolutely. Especially for new unpublished writers. Like this interview will go on the Old Women Who Write website, and
Yes.
also on the Old Women Who Write Facebook page. And it's always a question because almost everyone there is a new writer or a would-be writer. And I think there's a lot of, we all have insecurities
Oh
about,
yeah.
you know, and it really only takes, I remember, just as you said, the first couple of reviews I got that were really good, I was
Yeah.
so, like, oh my gosh, because I had
There's
no
not a
idea
feeling
what I
like it,
was going
Jean,
to
is there?
write. It's just amazing to me. Amazing. I didn't know what to make of it.
Wonderful. And I do feel that, you obviously take the good with the bad, and it's sometimes harder to hear, the negatives. But I've been very conscious to work on those,
Yes, yes,
over the years I've been writing. I
yes.
suppose I was always very lucky as well that even when I submitted, I'd get quite constructive feedback from people.
Oh,
So that was really helpful because I know now that they're so swamped with submissions that they don't often have, they just sort of send a pat response, don't they,
yes,
to
yes.
people. But I remember certain people telling me, you use that too often, which is a very common thing,
That's a very good thing, right?
yeah. And
Very,
so things like that help massively, and I've devoured all this
right.
information, I suppose.
Now, are all the books you've written are all fiction?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
they are.
okay. And do you have one in the works right now?
I do. I'm only about 15,000 words in, and I feel like it's going to be more lead, perhaps even than the art of a butterfly.
Mm.
But this one is set on the East Coast. I don't know if you've heard of places like Whitby, where Dracula, there's the Whitby Abbey, where Dracula's supposed to have gone to, and it's a very atmospheric part of the world,
Huh.
is the East Coast, and partially set there in a village there. And then also there's in Yorkshire, there were parts of South Yorkshire was very popular for steelworks. So there's going to be part of the business, but ultimately, all that aside, it's always about love. All my stories are always about love, but not only the romantic love, because I feel like there's so many important relationships in his life, like obviously as parents, if we're lucky, and as children, and so on, and friendship,
Yes.
and I really don't just want to write about romantic love, so whatever's happening in terms of plot and setting, it
Yes.
all ultimately boils down to relationships and love.
Right. Right. Well, do you know, you're going to have to tell folks how to get your books because I first went and looked on Amazon, US Amazon, couldn't find you. Then I went to Amazon UK, couldn't find you. So uh, talk to people about how you can get your books, and then I'm going to probably ask you to send me the web address information so I can put it on this video for people. But tell people, how do you get The Art of a
that's
Butterfly or any other
that's
books by Joe Priestley?
yeah, that's right. That's good to know, really, because obviously when I go in, I type my Joe Priestley in the search box, and it just brings up my book. So obviously that's not the
Yeah,
case all over the
yeah.
world. Well, I do have there's a womenofoldyorkshire.com is the website, which you can go through. On like my Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, there's like the biome, there's a link tree,
Yeah.
and it's a universal link tree. So the theory is that whichever Amazon you're using, it will direct you to that
Okay. You're going to
page.
have to send that to me so I can put it in writing
Yes,
on here. Can you hear the leaf
yes,
blowers outside?
yeah,
The yard
that's
people are
life.
now here. Of course they are. Just as I'm recording, they're with their big machines blowing leaves or doing whatever they're doing. Um, so we will tell people how to get your books, and I do encourage all of you out there to read The Art of a Butterfly. It is there's no murder, there's no killings, there's no there's no horrible things going on. It is just a very, very well written, tight story book that you will enjoy very much.
Thank you, Jane.
So, Joe,
That's so lovely.
we should give out the secret that we had a hell of a time getting this done today. Something about going across the pond Our the
It
Zooming things
worked.
weren't working. Nothing was working. One finally worked, but Joe had no camera. Who knows? I'm glad we got together.
Oh, me too. It's been super meeting you.
It's been just really enjoyable. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and keep writing. And so I want
Oh,
to keep reading.
oh, and to you too as well. I look forward to you reading your
Thank
books,
you.
G.
And thank you all for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this interview with Joe Reed, aka Joanne Reed, aka Joanne Priestley. And I will put all her information up for you. And I will see you on the next time.